let's talk about Puerto Rico. There's a new Harvard study. We mentioned this the other day on the show that suggests that Hurricane Maria has killed thousands of Puerto Ricans. And, in fact, I'll give the number specifically, 4,581. The official death toll still stands at 64. Now, I want you to explain this study in a second. And I'm asking this question not in any way. I mean, I loathe this administration. Their response to Puerto Rico is as disgusting as you would expect. And U.S. policy, frankly, far beyond the Trump administration, is obviously colonial towards Puerto Rico. But, I mean, have they kept it at 64 because they're at least maybe even publicly making a claim that they're, waiting to confirm a higher number, or they don't want to sort of throw out new statistics before they know more? I mean, because that, even by their standards, that disparity is that's like a Gaddafi statistic.
Yeah, no, they are working with George Washington University to put together a more scientific count. The count that they currently have reflects the fact that I believe local law requires the medical examiners from the government in San Juan to examine each individual body to determine whether whether the person died as a result of the storm. And logistically, that's been very difficult to do.
Okay, so let's talk about this Harvard study. How did they go about it, and how did they sort of arrive to that number?
Right. So they just took a more macro approach and looked at. They surveyed I believe 30,000 Puerto Rican households and sort of asked whether there were deaths in the family and whatnot, and then selected them randomly, adjusted for population, and then compared the counts they arrived at to the death toll in 2016 over the same 3 months, and basically found that nearly 5,000 more people died between September and December in 2017 in Puerto Rico than did in 2016, and you wonder why that is. Well, it's almost certainly because you had a hurricane wipe out electricity and leave many hospitals without any power for long stretches of time, no cell service across large stretches of the island, and you have a population that is disproportionately elderly, and the elderly are disproportionately impoverished, and you have a recipe for mass death.
And let's just re-review. I'm just quote you briefly, and I'd like you to elaborate on the federal government had time to deploy satellite phones to the island to avoid communications blackout, which you just mentioned, that isolated remote areas from the territory's government. It could have delivered reserves of food, fuel, and water in advance of the storm. All of these failings. I mean, I would like maybe just like a kind of re-review and a reminder in the context of this administration, where it's just the sort of daily atrocities and failures and every sort of human grotesqueness, this is the type of thing that people sort of forget about. But I mean, first of all, it is actually in the United States, and it reflects this, broad colonial extractive history of Puerto Rico. So maybe just, re-review what really should be, in many respects, their Katrina.
Yeah, well, I think, as you alluded to, do I think that if Trump did everything right, that there wouldn't have been mass deaths from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico? Probably not. I think that as you suggested, we've already, bear a great deal of responsibility for the real economic ruination of the island, and the fiscal issues that the island had resulted in having an electrical grid that was not prepared to handle a storm that was very likely going to come at some point. So, arguably, the Obama administration, all past administrations, bear some responsibility for those underlying conditions. But could Trump have done much more than he did? Obviously. They had advance notice of the storm. They did nothing to prepare for it. He went on a 4-day golf vacation after it made landfall. They did almost nothing after that. They distributed resources, emergency federal resources. They gave more to Texas, even though Texas was dealing with a less severe emergency after Harvey than they did to Puerto Rico. And, the most gratuitous things about the Trump administration is the way that the president added insult to injury, by feuding with the mayor of San Juan over Twitter, going to Puerto Rico and saying how, they should be like happy that this is not a real tragedy like Katrina.
Throwing paper towels at people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So, very sort of giving, like, just, in some ways, maybe this is what Trump is useful for, like, making the way that our country fundamentally views this category of its citizens as unequal and less human, making it really sort of visible, not just in policy, but in rhetoric. But yeah, so I think that, that Trump's inadequate response killed people. I think that probably the longer history of America's extractive relationship with Puerto Rico probably killed more, or probably did more to facilitate the destruction that Maria wrought.